Both birds in the air and flying geese belong to a family of quilt patterns in which flight is the theme. Well, migrating birds or geese instinctively know which direction to fly. Well, for the fugitive slaves, these quilt patterns provided directions. Once a direction was established, the fugitives were able to travel on. Well, can you just imagine this birds in the air quilt turned in a certain direction on a front yard fence? It was just beautiful, and reproduction fabrics from the Civil War time period. And I just love the setting because it actually appears if it's in the fields and furrows layout. Similar to log cabin, isn't it? Well, Teresa made this one for me, and I just love it. Now you can create different themes of birds just by changing the fabric. Lois Thornhill made a field of straight set bluebirds with 3 red cardinals right here. Oh, and they're just so pretty. Well, Lois also used flying geese patches in the border and some red cardinals out here as well. Just charming in blue. I love it. Well, Lynn Sethna gave hers an interesting name. This one is called The Birds and the Bees. Pretty clear, isn't it? It's in recognition of these tiny little bees flying among the birds. And I think these little bees are on their way to the beehive on the back. And Lynn also made this one as well, very bright. And she called it Peacocks of a Feather Flock Together. Just love the bright colors. She did stippling in the background and then just outlined the larger triangle. So pretty. Now, Sue Bouchard went just as bright with this one. She used French fabrics and primary colors. Ooh, the whole mood is changed just with these bright colors. And then this one really tones that whole story down. Roberta Hartley made this one, and she actually used a light purple in the background, light lavender, and then she mixed this large-scale border in with her birds. Well, all of the quilts are just beautiful. Well, we'll fly these birds out of here with the next quilt. This one's called the Wild Goose Chase. It's a variation made with the flying geese patch. Now, if I were a fugitive, I wouldn't know which direction to travel, but I do know how to make the blotch. I would feel like I was on a wild goose chase if I were a runaway traveling hundreds of miles without a map. Well, Sue Bouchard created a beautiful road map with this wild goose chase quilt. It's a 3 fabric quilt. Now her dark is her geese, and then the sky or the background surrounds it. Both of these pieces read solid from a distance. The 3rd fabric is this medium scale, multicolored print, and it just ties them together. And even the grid quilting looks wonderful when it goes from geese to geese. Easy to do. Now, when you set your blocks together, you create a secondary pattern right here. And this secondary pattern is repeated up in the borders just to tie it all together. And talk about tying together. Look at this red folded border. It is perfect. Well, this is a lap robe quilt. It's only 6 blocks, 2 by 3, fast and easy to do. Now we're talking geese again. We're talking 2 by 4 finished size geese, just little ones this time. And you can also have the light geese or the dark geese. It just depends how you make it. Now when you have the light geese, you're going to sew 4 together in a row, and then with this central square right here, a dark central square, if you put all of the geese pointing into that central square, you create that star pattern. It's just wonderful. And an old-fashioned 2 fabric quilt, perfect. Or if you take the dark geese, you sew 4 together, and then from that central point, you just turn all the geese away from that center. It looks like the geese are just flying in all directions. They're going wild. Well, the geese come from 2 different sizes of squares, and it just depends how you place them to get that coloration. The geese is always the small square. It's a 5.5-inch square, so you can see that. And the sky is always the second square, a 7-inch square. And so depending which size you cut your square, you get that different look in geese. Well, we're going to do a dark goose today. Dark geese, singular, plural. So I'm just going to start out with these 2 squares. This is the 7-inch. The large one, it's the background. I'm going to place it on the grid. Take the 5.5-inch, the dark, place it right sides together to it and center it. And then, see if you remember this technique. I'm going to take the 45-degree line on just a 6x12 ruler. And when I see that it can line up from corner to corner, I know it's perfect. And that one looks really good. So just draw a diagonal line right through there. And gosh, if you've got some pins handy, why not? Just stick a couple of pins in there to hold those 2 together. Okay, it's a 1/4-inch seam. And you want to make sure you get a perfect 1/4 inch. If you end up with a scant quarter this time, your geese probably just won't fit together in the end. Now, I have a bar on my foot. I'm just dropping that 1/4-inch bar right along that line so that my stitching is a 1/4 inch away, and I'm just going to turn it around and sew on the other side. Now, for each block, you need to have a total of 16 geese. And this just works perfect because with these 2 squares, I can get 4 geese. So to get the total of 16, I need to do 4, just like this. Thank heavens, it's easy math. Got to get my threads clipped. Okay, there's my stitching. 1/2 inch from thread to thread. Pull out those pins. How about a real quick? Set that seam so that you don't have any distortion. That is the bias. So you want to set the seam so you don't have any distortion. And then go back to your cutter and just cut these in half. And actually at this point, kind of looks like, okay, we've got 2 geese right there. So remember now, putting the large triangle on the top is the most important thing. You don't worry about color. You worry about size of triangle. It's the large triangle. You just lift it up and just press away from it. And I'm doing this so that in the final step, then the geese lay perfectly flat. You are going to love this if you have never done it before. Okay, so take the second one, large triangle on top, press the seam. And so you can see, even though it's a little unusual in quilting, the seam is behind. In this time, it is light, but it's the large triangle. That's what's most important. So take these 2 pieces and place them right sides together. You put sky and geese right sides together. Keep this seam parallel going right down through here. And then when you look at the outside edges, I always think of those as crabs. If you've got crab legs, you know you're doing your geese right. So now take your ruler again, line up the 45-degree line, and just draw corner to corner one more time, right through there. And so, once again too, actually I want to keep that flat laying there, huh? No little turns or twists in my seams. Okay, grab hold of your threads. Now, at this point, I'm going against the seam. That'll be great because it'll lay down flat, but underneath, just going to take my finger, push it up, make sure it's flat, and just place my fingers on both sides of that seam so that it doesn't flip underneath. And at the end, just go ahead and turn it around and do the second side. Now, when you're assembly line sewing, you could do all 4 of these at the same time so that you don't have to jump up and down at the iron over and over again. Works great. Okay, now, there we go. 1/2 inch in between. Just get your scissors, get your cutter, your ruler, and cut right down through again. Now, these are small geese that we're making here, little pieces. So we want them to lay, the seams to lay flat away from the geese. So right here, take that little clip with your scissors so that they lay perfectly flat on this one, and then over on this one. Do the same. It's actually right in between those two seams. You just take a clip right up to the stitches. Now, press it from the right side first. Just drop it on your pressing mat and go right in. Press flat from one geese, and then turn it halfway. Press on the second geese, and just turn it over on the back side. Steam is good. Actually, I really like steam. Just press it so that it's very flat. One more set, and you can see, got these 4 geese just about ready to square up. Now, I showed you how to use the ruler that has the 4x8 geese on it right here. You see the 4x8 geese, but the piece that I want now, the part of the ruler I want right now, is the end that says the 2x4 finished geese. And so I'm just going to place the 2x4 or the red line on the geese lines right on the seams, and this time you cannot cut completely around it, so you do 2 sides, do the 3rd side here, and then just pick this up, turn it, line up the diagonal line right with the seam again, and it's one more clip straight across there, and it's one perfect goose. 1/4 inch seam right up here, seams going right into the corners. Just take these and get rid of them. Now, you could also go ahead and just use your regular rulers and cut these pieces in half, cut them right down through the center, and actually square them up to 2.5 by 4.5 just with your regular rulers, but goes very quickly whenever you have the geese ruler. One more. So I just have one more set to trim up. And once you have a set of 4 trimmed up, all you have to do is just lay them like this and sew them together into pairs. Let me bring them close to my sewing machine. I'm going to actually turn them so that they're like this, so that the geese are pointing into the base, so that when you flip them right sides together, you can see the stitching right here. You want to stitch right across that point. And let me just line that up and I'll show you. Just to hold the ends when you start stitching, take your stiletto and hold that seam flat. And whenever you check, the stitching should cross right across that point. And when you open it up, this is going to be the true test. You should have a very crisp point. So I'm going to take these and sew pairs together into sets of 4. I need to have 4 of these for each block. And then I'm going to press my seams away from the base on the wrong side and then on the right side. And as soon as I get that done, I'll show you how to finish the block. I feel like a wild woman sewing my geese together, but the block is nearly done. Now the next unit that you need is a 4.5 inch square for the center. Now the geese are 2.5 by 4.5, so you can see that's just going to fit right in there, in between the two, the base going next to the 4.5 inch square. So just take one of the units, one of the geese, flip it right sides together, and right now you're going to see that you can have the seams on top, and you just want to match the outside edges. Just stitch that right along there. Now hold on here, because I told you I was wild. Just take it and put the square on the top, set the seam, and then just lift it open so that the seam is behind that center square. Of course, you know we're setting up those seams for the next step. Then just take this piece, flip it right sides together to the center square, and I think I'm just going to flip it around so that I have those geese on the top, and then just stitch right across there again. Hold on to it. Now the next pieces are 4-inch squares for the corners. And I'm actually using a dark and a medium for the corners. And you just take them for each block. You need to have one. Just take them, stack them up, and then cut them in half on the diagonal only once. Let me see if I can just cut that. Now, 2 of the darks are going to go on each end of this piece right here. So if I plan this, I'm going to take the dark and just flip it right sides together, and I want to keep it centered on there. You want to make sure you have it centered. And actually, I think it's best if you always sew with the bias on the bottom. So I'm just going to flip it over like this, and you're going to see how wild I really can be, how tricky I can be. Line that up, make sure that's centered on there, and then when you stitch across, just watch for that point of that geese. That's why I think it's best, you know, if you always have those seams on the top, you can see so you have a crisp end. Okay, let's just take this one, just zip it around like this. Take the triangle, put it underneath, center it on there, and just keep right on going. This is just like that Freedom train, that Underground Railroad going through. You know, have you ever thought about how they traveled? Oh, just think about their journey. Oh my gosh, their journey was unbelievable. Okay, so now I'm going to take these next 2, and they each get the medium on the end, like this. And actually, I think it's easiest if you do it this way. Turn them wrong side up, so you see that point. Keep these right side up, but just flip them right under like this. And then instead of doing a big flipping technique, if you just pick that up and slide it right onto there, center the triangles so that you see equal tips hanging out on both ends. That's what you want, equal tips, even tips on both sides. Just push this one through and then the next one. And that actually takes care of all 4 triangles for the corners of the quilt. And you can do just one color if you want to, especially on the 1-color star, the 2-color star. Now, got them all chained together. And I'm just going to just place them on the pressing mat, set that seam very quickly going right down along there. This is assembly line at its best. Just lift that up and just flip these pieces right up into it. And then clip them apart. Whoops, better hold on to that iron. Just clip them apart. And then once you clip them apart, it's best if you go ahead and just trim off these outside edges here and just square them off on one side and on the other. Now, these are the medium pieces. These have the medium triangles on the corners, and they go with the next piece that is 12.5 inches square. Let me just set these aside, and I have the medium 12.5 inch square. I want to cut it from corner to corner on both diagonals into 4s. And it's something about the grain with this. You know, one way the grain stretches, one way the grain is very stable. So I like to just go ahead, cut them into 4s, and separate them out like this and just keep them in their same position. Now this long piece is going to go right down through the center. Let me clip these threads holding them together. This is going to go right down through here. And then the 2 side pieces go one here and one here. Looking good. Now, all you have to do is just take this piece and flip it right sides together to it. This part is easy because there's no seams that you have to fight when you're going down along there. And let me just push this right here like so. Line up that edge. Hold those seams flat and just stitch right down along. But the next side, you're actually going to be fighting those seams. It's not quite as easy. Let me show you. So you open that out. When this piece goes right sides together to it, this is the bias. And you really want to stitch with the bias on the bottom. So if you turn it over like this, get it pinned in place, you really need to stitch going right up against that seam. But I think it's best if you just go ahead and pin the corners here, like so, and then down here, like this. And then just stitch going up, but hold that flat with your stiletto. And then you open it out and press your seams so that they're behind the triangles like this. And then comes the tricky part. Oh my gosh, we got to get those pins out because you really need to do some pinning at this seam. And you want to line up between here and here, here and here. And you also have those 1/4 inch seams that you need to deal with. So when you flip it right sides together, the best thing is to take a pin and push it right through the V here and then underneath through the V there. And just squeeze those tight together. And when you sew across, sew with the triangles on the bottom so that you work with the stretch. So I'm just going to go ahead, finish the blocks, and I'll show you how to sew them together. My blocks are finished, and so they fit together. You really need to square up those oversized corners. Just take a 12.5 inch square up ruler and place it so that the diagonal line just follows right along with the tip of the geese, and just push it up so that you have the 1/4 inch line on the ruler right on those seams. And just hold your ruler and just trim it down and across and make those corners nice and square. Now I have 4 blocks here, and you can see how they're joining in the center. So it's the 2 darks and the 2 mediums facing each other. Now you just flip them right sides together and sew straight down that row. And when you sew them, once again, put pins right through those seams. Put a pin here so that it pushes down through to the underneath side, and just continuously sew down and then across. Now the piece right here, this is the secondary pattern that you create, is the same piece that you put out in the border. And it comes from 2 5.5 inch squares of the medium and the dark. You place right sides together, draw 1 diagonal line on it, and you just sew on both sides of it. Cut it on that diagonal line, but before you're finished, you just go back and cut it 1 more time so that it's actually cut into force. And then you're going to put borders on 2 sides the same size. You attach these to the ends of the last 2 borders and just add those to the top 2. This is coming together so well. I just love it. I have 3 different quilts to show you, and each one is entirely different. My sister Pat did this one. It is a twin size quilt, or 3 blocks by 5 blocks. Now she used 2 different colorways, made purple blocks and blue blocks, and just alternated between the 2. Oh, but you know Patty, she did some other unique things as well. Right here in the center is the 4.5 inch blue block. When she cut her geese, she cut them all light. So this is the 5.5 inch light squares. The geese all point into the center so that you can see a star formation there. But when she did her geese, when she did her 7 inch squares, she cut 4 different colorways, 4 different blues, and they actually get in value from dark to light to the outside edge of the block. And then for the corner, she used a light blue. You can see how the purple is coming in here and joining right in the center. It's just beautiful. Well, Sandy Thompson did some free motion machine quilting throughout, and then some cabling around the border. And I'll show you what the back looks like because it's very interesting to see the quilting lines. Wonderful. Now my friend Teresa did the next one. She used only 2 different fabrics. She wanted it to look very old-fashioned, and I think it does. Once again, she did the star layout. It's all light geese pointing in towards that center, and because she only used 2 different fabrics, she used the same red out here in the corner as well. So you see a repeat of that square. She sent it to my cousin Carol Ann. She did the free motion machine quilting throughout the quilt. And Teresa decided to just add a binding. She said it'll look more old-fashioned without that border. And she's right. It's great. Now the next one was made by my friend Sue Bouchard. And she wanted to do a very scrappy look. This is 25 blocks, 5 by 5. Looks great on a king-size bed, but each one of the blocks is a different reproduction fabric. Oh, she got her pinks in there, her reds, her greens, her blacks. And then she did a very traditional quilting. She just did straight lines throughout. And it's fun because you can just go straight line through each one of the geese. She added simple borders and a stripe around the outside edge. And then she decided to add an 8-pointed star right here in the corner. The 8-pointed star is just made from more 2x4 geese. It's perfect. Well, don't go on a wild goose chase. Just enjoy making your quilt.